What's up, guys? So I'm doing the AFC North quarterback tier list with my boy Ace Boogey. Ace, how you doing?
I'm pretty good, man. Thanks for having me on, Quincy.
No problem. All right, so the rules of this tier list, because I didn't want to go through 35 Browns quarterbacks, is that to be eligible for this list, you have to have at least started 15 games. I think that's a fair limiter here. We're going to go through every quarterback in the AFC North that started 15 games on a AFC North team. So let's get started. So we got the tier list on screen. So the first guy we're going to talk about is a guy we don't talk about very much when it comes to AFC North quarterbacks or, Steelers history, but Kordell Stewart. He spent 3 years in Pittsburgh. There's 32 games, went 23-9 in that time period, but only threw for 6,000 yards, 6,124 yards on 58% completion percentage, 31 touchdowns, 25 interceptions, but he was a little bit of a unicorn of his times because he had 14 rushing touchdowns. So, Ace, let me know what you think about Kordell. Where do you think he should be on this list?
That's a pretty good person to start off with. And even though I hate the Steelers, I do remember Kordell Stewart in those days. I do remember him being pretty solid for them. I would probably put him in the C range. I'd probably say that he's harmless, but he's not going to do anything to hurt them. So he was a very solid kind of C average kind of guy in terms of that.
I would argue that if Kordell Stewart played in a different time, we would look at him dramatically different. Definitely. And I would say that he was a little bit more than just like a harmless quarterback. I think he added value. And I think like that win-loss record, 23-9. I think he got the job done in Pittsburgh. I don't think that they were necessarily limited in terms of their ability to be good because of Kordell Stewart.
Right.
And I think that puts him in that got the job done category to me, like that.
He did get the job done. Yeah. Now that I look at it, when you say that he got the job done, I definitely think he got the job done.
All right. Now, somebody that I don't know if you're going to think got the job done. We're going to talk about the boy Akili Smith, second pick of the 1999 draft. Him and Tim Couch went above Donovan McNabb. So
very familiar with this gentleman. And because of that, this is why I'm going to go with the grade that I'm going with. I'm going with the F, that he hurt the franchise. And this is why. That was the same year that the Saints offered every single one of their draft picks for your draft pick. And you know what? Mike Brown was like, I'm good on that. I'm going to pass on all of these amazing players and all of these amazing picks. And I'm going to pick Akili Smith, who was replaced by Gus Frye. So he's got to get out of there.
Ooh, all right. But just so sort of fans know, let me read out this dope stat line for that boy, Akili Smith. 4 years in Cincinnati, started 17 games, was 3-14, threw for 2,212 yards on, this is the tip of the iceberg, 46% completion. But he only threw 5 touchdowns in that time period, 13 interceptions. I cannot argue with you. And people argue about Tim Couch being a bust of that draft. I would always say you could have drafted Akili Smith.
Yes, that's correct.
who was much worse, much worse. All right, so the next guy is actually the guy who went number 1 in that draft, and that is actually Tim Couch. Tim Couch has an interesting legacy in Cleveland because there are a lot of Tim Couch believers out there in the Browns fan base. His stat line in his 4 years in Cleveland was 45 games started. He had a 20-25 record, threw for 8,684 yards on 61% completion. Not terrible, but his touchdown to interception ratio was suspect. 49 touchdowns, 54 interceptions. As a Browns fan, I've heard strong opinions either way with Tim Couch and who he would have been or what he could have been if he wasn't in Cleveland. But I'm interested to hear, as somebody who had to face Tim Couch a lot, what your thoughts are on him.
I would probably say that he's in that David Carr category where some people say he shoulda, coulda, but the reality is it is what it is. And I was never scared to see Tim Couch. And I think from an outsider perspective, I've always viewed him as a bust as well. And I was very familiar with him. I definitely expected him to definitely do a better job than he did, but he was not someone that I was shaking in my boots about when it came to it.
Yeah, and see, my thing with Tim Couch is look, you can make the argument that he was ultimately harmless because the Browns did make the playoffs with him while he was quarterback, and he had moments. Tim Couch had moments. He threw a lot of interceptions, but he had a lot of different coaches. He had a lot of injuries going on. He didn't get a fair shake. But why I can't put him in that C group, that harmless group, is because he was the first overall pick. And he wasn't Akili Smith, but he also wasn't Donovan McNair, or anybody interesting in that draft. So ultimately, I think I'm going to have to give the boy in the D mediocre. He wasn't terrible enough to where he set the Browns back.
But he wasn't Akili Smith either.
Yeah, but he wasn't he wasn't good. But so next we're gonna go with Tommy Maddox, often not spoken of. Again, just like Kordell Stewart. It's the memory of Big Ben is erased these guys. But Tommy Maddox spent 5 years in the AFC North in the 2000s. Started 32 games, had a 16-1 record with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Not great considering it's the Pittsburgh Steelers. 7,139 yards, 58% completion, 42 touchdowns, 40 interceptions. Ace, what are your thoughts on Tommy Maddox?
See, when we talked about Kordell Stewart, I kind of thought about Tommy Maddox, and I tried to think about between those two, who would be the better quarterback. And I kind of started to kind of drift to the Tommy Maddox side of things. But now that you just said his stats, I don't know if the perception, I don't know if it was a Troy Aikman thing where I thought this guy was better than he actually was numbers-wise. But for me, I think given those circumstances, I would say Tommy Maddox, I really want to say that I want to say that he got the job done. I want to say that he got the job done, at least for the Steelers in that moment of time. I remember the guys like Charlie Batch, and just thinking about it, I remember that even though he wasn't amazing, he was still solid. The Steelers were still solid up until they drafted Ben Roethlisberger. And I remember when he came in, it wasn't it's straight up Big Ben's job. It was he kind of had to battle it out with Tommy Maddox to get the job.
Yeah, I'm kind of in between that B and C group with him. And again, we're going on the scale of AFC North quarterbacks too. Yeah, I think Tommy Maddox got the job done, but I think he's probably first guy cut from this group. If somebody else comes up.
Yeah, let's go with harmless. He's harmless. He's harmless.
We'll throw him in C. All right, so we got 4 guys down. Now the next guy, Kyle Boller. Oh man,
I should have been a bowler.
5 years in the AFC North, 42 starts for the Ravens, went 20-22, threw for 7,846 yards on 57% completion, 45 touchdowns, 44 interceptions.
Kyle, I should have been a bowler. The one thing that always sticks out in my mind is I remember there was an opening night game where the Bengals played the Ravens, and this Ravens defense was amazing. It was all time, it was really good. And the one thing that I remember is the only reason we were in that game and the only reason we ended up winning was because of Kyle Boller. He I don't know if he fumbled somehow it was a fumble where we recovered it in the end zone and then it was a touchdown. It was a god awful play on his part. He literally was the reason we won the game. So for those years, I really enjoyed them because even though they had teams where they even had Deion Sanders in the secondary with Samari Rolle and Chris McAllister and those great defenses, he held them back. He held them completely back. And because of that, I'm going to say that he is mediocre.
I agree with you. And you look at this stat line, there's really not much different between Tommy Maddox and Kyle Boller. But I think the interesting thing you can do to distinct these two is that Tommy Maddox gave people that aura of confidence that kind of affects how you view him today. I think people had more confidence in Tommy Maddox just because he just seemed like a better leader. Kyle Boller inspired no confidence. Next guy. This is a guy who brings back some fine memories for me. Charlie Frye. I don't know if you remember Charlie Frye.
I remember that name.
3 years in the NFL. Well, 3 years for the Cleveland Browns. 19 starts for the Cleveland Browns. 6-13 record. Threw for 3,490 yards on a surprisingly high 62% completion percentage, and threw for 14 touchdowns and 23 interceptions. And the main thing I remember about Charlie Frye was that he would run to his right and throw across his body all the time. But Ace, what are your thoughts about Charlie Frye?
Charlie Frye, I just remember him as being there and being gone. You probably have better insight on him than me, but I think that he's definitely probably, just from my perspective, Tim Couch mediocre level. But you might have more insight than I do, but that's what I kind of remember.
All right, so Charlie Frye was a local guy. For those who don't know, maybe if you're a younger Browns fan or a younger AFC North fan, he was a local guy, went to the University of Akron, was like a hero in the University of Akron. And I think this is about the same time that like Josh Cribbs was coming up. So like there was a really big like local vibe going on with the team. This is when the Browns, I think 05 was when he started. We had Kellen Winslow. We were going to get, Braylon. We also had Braylon Edwards. Like it was looking up. It was looking up. And then Tim Couch was there, and people didn't want to get rid of Tim Couch because he was local, but like he was bad. Like once he left the team in 2007, he got traded after being terrible against the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Browns went 10-6 after that. Well, 10-5 after that. And it wasn't like somebody great replaced him. It was Derek Anderson. So
I like Derek Anderson. I'm sure we're going to talk about him, but yeah.
Oh yeah, we gonna get to Derek Anderson. But yeah, for that alone, you got to throw him in a mediocre category. He didn't hurt the franchise because ultimately he was like a late round draft pick, so you can't really say he hurt anybody. But he was just another failed quarterback experience, which there are many of. Speaking of a guy who stuck around in Cincinnati longer than I thought he did, Jon Kitna.
Yes.
5 years in Cincinnati, 46 starts, 18-28 record, threw for 10,707 yards, 59% completion rate, and a surprising 59 touchdown, 59 interception, 59 overall in Madden. What are your thoughts on Jon Kitna being the Bengals fan that you are?
Another thing some people also forget is he also, once he left Cincinnati, he started for the Detroit Lions for a while after that. Jon Kitna, I'm going to say that Jon Kitna, low-key, was the person who kicked off the revamp of the Bengals in 2003. He was... Even before then, let's go back to even 2002. Akili Smith and Gus Frye simply were not good options, right? And he came in and at least made the game somewhat salvageable. He made Peter Warrick better. He started the game where those Bengals ended up upsetting the Chiefs when they were 8-0, I believe. It's like a classic game that's still on YouTube to this day. And Jon Kitna, in my perspective of seeing all of these bad quarterbacks, he was the first solid quarterback that actually came through for Cincinnati. And he did a great job and engineered an 8-8 season, which was like the Super Bowl for us in those days because we were used to winning 2 and 3 games and seeing horrible football be played. So for me, I would actually put Jon Kitna in the B range, surprisingly. He definitely got the job done. It was just the fact that we had drafted Carson Palmer #1 overall. He had to play, but there were some people that were like, man, Jon Kitna wasn't that bad. We got Jeff Blake, we got Jon Kitna, and then you kind of get into our other quarterbacks. So for me, I'd actually say that he got the job done.
I have never... I don't know. I've never talked to anybody about Jon Kitna. This is the first Jon Kitna conversation I've had. I did not know he was looked at favorably in Cincinnati, and I can't argue with that. I have no counter argument when it comes to a take on Jon Kitna because,
I was trolling one day and I said that Andy Dalton is just a souped up Jon Kitna.
Oh boy. Jon Kitna, I guess. All right. So the next one, I don't think we're going to have to talk about this one too much. Big Ben, 16 years in the AFC North and counting, 216 games, 144 and 71 and 1 record, 56,000 yards. Has a 393 to 191 touchdown interception ratio. Also won 2 Super Bowls. He's S tier, right? Like, I don't like him, but yeah, he's S tier. There's no debating that. Yeah,
first ballot S tier easily.
Yeah,
not even. Yep, don't even need to give an explanation.
Yeah, we're just gonna move on to the next guy now, and this is gonna be interesting because this is a name that always stokes up conversations in Bengals circles. Carson Palmer, 7 years in Cincinnati, 97 starts, 46 and 51 record, 22,694 yards, 154 touchdowns to 100 interceptions. Your thoughts on Carson Palmer?
Carson Palmer was amazing when he first got to Cincinnati, especially in 2005. I personally would say during that time, to me, he was a top 3 quarterback. Now, that's just my opinion, but given that season that he had in 2005, he was just really ascending. And we were just on fire. You know, that was the first year that we actually took it to the Steelers, and teams just could not stop us offensively. And obviously that season ended with him getting Chemo Van Offen in the playoffs, and that somewhat changed the trajectory of his career. He was never, to me, that 2005 guy, but even 85% Palmer was still leaps and bounds better than what we've had before, and was still a top half of the league quarterback. So for me, I would say that he's an A tier, even though he did give up on the Bengals, and I thought that he did throw a lot of interceptions. He was the pick six king, as we refer to him. He was kind of getting his Jameis Winston on for a while, but to keep it funky and all the way 100, he definitely brought the Bengals out of the dark ages and finally gave us winning seasons and made us a respectable team. So I'd have to put him in the A tier.
I have to agree. I remember being young. Carson Palmer was definitely somebody you worried about, especially with his connection with what was TJ Houshmandzadeh,
yes,
and Chad Johnson back when he was just Chad Johnson, just killing.
And Chris Henry too. Chris Henry as well.
Chris Henry, and then I think in the backfield was that Rudy Johnson,
Johnson, and then later it was Cedric Benson.
Yeah, those are good Bengals teams, and I always look forward to the Browns-Bengals games because I knew those were going to be hard fought and close.
Yeah, that
games.
Battle of Ohio. Not to get too far off track, but remember we had like that crazy, like highest scoring NFL game until a few years ago. It was Bengals and Browns.
Yeah, it's Browns fans will never forget that because I think that was Derek Anderson's first start. They just went off, and it was like, oh, the Browns might not be terrible in 2007.
He snapped. Yeah, you guys were good.
Speaking of the AFC North, a guy who didn't spend a lot of time in the AFC North, but a guy whose legacy is big, but we're only looking at what he did in the AFC North. Steve Air McNair, the late Steve Air McNair. A lot of respect for him. 2 years in NFL, 22 starts, went 15-7 with the Ravens, 4,163 yards on 64% completion, 18-16 touchdown interception ratio. And I know that he wasn't Steve Air McNair when he got to the Ravens, but he was not bad that first year with the Ravens. I never understood why they couldn't just go with him over like the young Kyle Boller at the time.
Right.
Because they were clearly more successful when he was out there. But what are your thoughts on Air McNair when he was on the Ravens?
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if I'm misremembering this, but didn't they bring him in or didn't they trade for him to replace Kyle Boller? Wasn't he like the Kyle Boller replacement?
I think they brought him in to kind of compete with Kyle Boller, and I think he got injured. Yeah, I think he got injured, which is why they kept on going back and forth. And then I think later on in his career, he got hurt. Because I know Kyle Boller was on the team they drafted Joe Flacco, I think.
Gotcha. I'm gonna say that Steve McNair got the job done. Like he didn't blow you away. He wasn't still that Pro Bowl caliber guy that we saw in Tennessee, but he was still somewhat formidable, at least to get the job done with that defense that they had over there and give them some kind of spark on offense. And I think I remember they also had Derek Mason, I think, as well, who was his former teammate in Tennessee, and he just kind of gave a spark to that offense.
Definitely agree with you there. All right, so the next guy, we kind of touched on him. Derek Anderson spent 4 years on the Browns, 34 starts, 16 and 18 record, 7,083 yards on 53% completion, 46 touchdowns, 45 interceptions. As an outsider, as a non-Browns fan, what do you think about Derek Anderson?
I like Derek Anderson. Believe it or not, I always say that all the time. Like, Derek Anderson, for me, was a very solid quarterback. To me, I feel like he got the job done. I remember those teams where you guys had Braylon Edwards, Kellen Winslow. You had him. I think at one point Jamal Lewis, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, sir.
But Derek Anderson, to me, was the first Browns quarterback during that era that I was like, all right, we got to watch out for this guy because he can light us up. So for me, Derek Anderson, I think, is kind of somewhat underrated. So I would probably say that he's in that B tier as well from my outsider perspective.
Interesting. See, we have a completely different view of Derek Anderson in Cleveland, because I remember 2007 was like the first season like I was like a real Browns fan, because it was just at the right time in my life. I was like old enough to start to understand sports. And I remember the attitude around Derek Anderson, even though he's the only guy to make the Browns have like a winning record outside of Tim Couch, is that the Browns fans were pretty much like, yo, we should trade Derek Anderson immediately and move on to Brady Quinn, because that was the year that we drafted Brady Quinn in 2007, who doesn't even qualify for this list because he did not start 15 games. So the Cleveland Browns fans never bought into Derek Anderson. And Derek Anderson, like, is definitely the kind of dude that you have to like sit there and be like, look, we like you. You're going to be great. Like, if he doesn't have those circumstances, he gets rattled. He plays in sporadically, and that's what led to him having a really bad 2008 when they started pushing Brady Quinn in there. I just can't say he was a B guy, because he had that one season, but it just fell apart so fast for him. Gotcha. And I just don't think the stability was there. If they would have qualified for the playoffs that year and they didn't lose to the Jamarcus Russell Oakland Raiders, he might make it. He would make it in that B, because you can't take that away from him. But he's top end, harmless.
Gotcha.
He's top end. He's better than Kyle Boller, because he beat Kyle Boller when he was in Cleveland. But he's top end, harmless. I'll put him at the top of that category, because just Derek Anderson, man, he does not have a positive like rep in Cleveland for whatever reason.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy.
All right, so the next guy is a guy who just left the AFC North a couple years ago, Joe Flacco, 11 years in Baltimore, 163 starts, a 96-67 record, threw for 38,000 yards on 62% completion, 212 touchdowns, 136 interceptions, one Super Bowl. What's your thoughts on Mr. Joe Flacco?
Joe Flacco is a complicated case, because I never feared Joe Flacco whenever we played him. And it just seemed like he got hot at that right time. And I actually celebrated, well, I didn't celebrate them winning the Super Bowl, but when they gave him that extension and making him the number one highest paid quarterback in the NFL at that time, because I just knew that the wheels were going to fall off once they wouldn't be able to bring back Ray Rice, which that ended up happening for other reasons, and they got rid of Anquan Bolden. So for me, because of that, I can't view him in the same tier as Big Ben. I could view him in the same tier as Carson Palmer, and he's really there, I think, because he gets the Super Bowl. And obviously Carson Palmer doesn't have one, but I think if we were going off of like raw talent, Carson Palmer's better. But I'd have to say, given the accolades and given what he did for Baltimore, given that Super Bowl run, he's got to be in the A tier.
Yeah, and you know what? I agree with you. I also feel like with Joe Flacco, like so many people still to this day, like, will not give Joe Flacco any credit for that Super Bowl run. And like everybody like has revisionist history about that Super Bowl run. I remember watching that, hoping that the Ravens would lose, but Joe Flacco was amazing during the playoffs that year. He was like breaking a John Elway record. He was so good. And people still are like, well, it was Ray Lewis in that defense. That defense was trash. Ray Lewis was not good with one bicep in 2012. He was not good.
And that deer antler spray.
Yeah. Like it wasn't like the 2000 Ravens where it was like, well, that defense carried Joe Flacco to the Super Bowl. He's not good. No, he earned that contract. And he's the exact reason why if you have a contending team, you don't let your quarterback go into a contract year, because he might win the Super Bowl and make you have to waste a lot of money, you know. That's what he did. And you know what? Just that playoff run, it doesn't get him into S because he didn't sustain it over years. But you know, that Super Bowl run he went on, that was some like franchise quarterback level stuff. He never consistently showed that level of play, but it was some franchise level stuff going on there for Joe Flacco for at least that year. Now, speaking of a guy who the franchise quarterback argument is synonymous with, Andy Dalton, 9 years and counting technically in Cincinnati, 133 starts, 70-61 record, 70-61-2 record, threw for 31,594 yards on 62% completion, 204 touchdowns, 118 interceptions. Ace, your thoughts?
My thoughts on Andy Dalton, and it's crazy because I actually went back with the Game Pass and started watching early on, some early seasons in 2011. When you look at Andy Dalton's resume, it's a really good resume outside of the fact that he has no playoff wins. So he was a guy that took over right after Carson Palmer ended up retiring on the Bengals. He had no offseason because that was during the lockout. So in his first season, he ended up taking the Bengals to the playoffs, 9-7. He actually has better numbers than Carson Palmer during that span with his career with the Bengals. He's actually the Bengals all-time passing leader, believe it or not. But the biggest mark against him is that he could never play well in the big moments. It just seems like he always fizzles on that. Man, I have to say that he's better than Jon Kitna. And I would definitely say he's in line with Carson Palmer, but I guess I gotta go. I wish there was an A- here for this, but I guess I have to give Andy Dalton a pretty good, just given the fact that he was able to do what he did for so long and so consistently when most people just expected him to essentially not do anything, really. He kind of exceeded expectations. We'll have to see what happens if he goes to the New England Patriots after we release him. But he just essentially is a guy that's only as good as what's around him. But when you have what's good around him, he can put up great numbers. And that did make me remember in 2015, he did have an MVP caliber season. He just had horrible luck and tried to tackle a Steeler and got essentially a broken thumb. So for me, I guess I'm comfortable with putting him in the A tier. What about you?
You made a compelling argument for him in the A tier. And one thing I forgot about Andy Dalton was he wasn't a high draft pick. He was a second round pick?
Second round pick?
You got that many years out of second round pick. I don't know how people can be hating on that. Because, you know, I done seen what a second round pick quarterback can get you. And we're going to talk about one of them pretty soon here. But it ain't normally great. So with that, it's just kind of odd because, like, yeah, you could say, like, he didn't win any playoff games. But I have no problem associating Carson Palmer with that A tier. But when it comes to Andy Dalton, he only gets held against him because he had more playoff games to lose in. Like, but he got there more often, and he has a much better record. And I think, you know, I don't think people are going to ride with this one because I think Andy Dalton, everybody likes to make him kind of like the butt of a joke. But you do make a compelling point. He is an A-tier guy. If we're going to put Joe Flacco and Carson Palmer in there, he definitely got a spot. All right, so we're going to go to our next guy, Colt McCoy. And if you don't believe me, my dad and a section of Browns fans still talk about Colt McCoy should have got a shot. But 3 years on the Browns, 21 starts, 6-15 record, threw for 4,388 yards on 58% completion, 21 touchdowns, 20 interceptions. Now, Colt McCoy is loved by the city of Cleveland because he was like a hard worker and an undersized guy, and he's tough, and he took that hit from James Harrison. So people have a lot of like love for him. But I wasn't one of those folks. I always thought this man was garbage and not good enough. And I don't care what you surrounded him with. Homeboy was not good because you could be short and be a good quarterback. I don't think that's the problem. He didn't have an arm, Ace. He couldn't throw in the wind. And the Brown Stadium is on a lake. If we had 25-mile-per-hour winds, the deep ball was out of commission. Then you could not throw the ball deep. Like you just had to go. They had to switch to the West Coast offense because Colt McCoy was a quarterback. He was always like an effort guy. I thought dudes like Connor Shaw were better than him. Like he just never was. I get why people like him, but like to me, he's mediocre. If you see Colt McCoy as the starting quarterback of a team that's coming up on the schedule, if you're not a terrible team, you like, yo, that's a dub. That's right. How I've always looked at it.
Yep.
Have you guys ever looked at Colt McCoy with any fear in Cincinnati?
We have not. I mean, he's been around for a while now. I would have thought that he would have actually have been out of the league by now, but I think he is essentially now just transitioned into like the traditional backup quarterback in the NFL. It's almost like, I can't remember the guy's name, but there was McCown. He's almost like Josh McCown, right? It's like when you throw him in there, you are probably going to get one good play and then an interception on the next. But he's not the guy that you want to have in there in a pinch. So for me, I think he is somewhat. I'm in between C and D, so I'm gonna put it in your court. I'm gonna put it in your court.
I don't want people to get angry in the comments, so I'm gonna give him a light C. I'll give him a he was harmless. He wasn't a high draft pick. You know, he was just pretty much thrown out there because everything else failed around him. And those teams he were on were like not good teams. Like, I don't want to put it all on him. I just don't think he ever had the ability to play in the NFL. He just had heart. And, you know, I respect heart. I do. I really do respect heart. But when we talk about professional sports, you know, heart don't really set you apart. The next guy I'd have no love for. I'll just put this out here. Brandon Weeden, who replaced Colt McCoy, 2 years in the NFL, 20 starts, 5-15 record, threw for 5,000 yards, 56% completion, 23 touchdowns, 26 interceptions. Before I go off, Ace, what are your thoughts on Brandon Weeden?
I just remember it seemed like a good idea at the time, like when you guys drafted him, but he was, to me, somewhat of a disaster just because he was so old. You know, the pick that you guys made, like it seemed like I said, it seemed like a good idea at the beginning, and then it just really unraveled pretty bad. I would probably say Brandon Weeden, from an outsider perspective, I would probably put him in the mediocre tier. I was thinking between harmless and mediocre, but I'm going to go with mediocre because I just remember him being like a blip.
Let me tell you why Brandon Weeden's the worst quarterback of all time. All right, so Brandon Weeden, was the 5th quarterback drafted in a draft that included RG3, who had that great rookie year, Russell Wilson, who came out of not really came out of nowhere. I knew about Russell Wilson when he was in Wisconsin. That's only because I watched Big Ten football. Was it Kirk Cousins also in that draft? Yeah, Kirk Cousins was in that draft. Ryan Tannehill was in that draft. A lot of good quarterbacks, and then Brandon Weeden. Brandon Weeden went before Kirk Cousins and Russell Wilson.
Oof.
Brandon Weeden at 27 years old. At 27 years old. Came from that Mike Gundy offense, which, by the way, if Mason Rudolph has improved, you should never draft a quarterback from the Mike Gundy offense. But anyways, let me tell you why Brandon Weeden was awful. First game, they doing the Pledge of Allegiance in the national anthem, and he gets tackled by a flag. That's the first start. That's the first game. He throws 4 interceptions in Philly, and he's awful. By 4 weeks in, this dude, who was a first-round draft pick and drafted over significantly better quarterbacks that went later on in that draft, was like already on the fence about whether we should start this dude or not. Okay, here's why I hate Brandon Weeden. He never went away. You could not get away. Like, those were the 2 longest years of NFL history, because by week 4, we were done with him. We wanted him off the team, and the dude just kept on finding a way to get on the NFL roster and to start games. He was a dude who got lucky and threw some touchdowns to Josh Gordon, but also was a dude who was exceedingly awful with prime Josh Gordon, which I don't think is possible. Like, prime Josh Gordon made the Patriots look stupid with nothing around him, and Brandon Weeden still couldn't figure that one out. Brandon Weeden also indirectly was so mediocre that he put the Browns in a lower tier of franchise that ultimately ended up in them taking a chance on a young guy that doesn't have all the attributes in Johnny Manziel, which also hurt the franchise. So Brandon Weeden, one of the worst quarterbacks to ever don a Browns uniform, if not one of the worst quarterbacks of all time, has one of the worst interceptions of all time. If you say the word Brandon Weeden near me, I get visibly upset. I get angry when I think about this man. I don't like Brandon Weeden. Brandon Weeden is definitely in the F tier, and I'm not taking any arguments on it. He's in the F tier.
I'm with it.
All right. The next guy up on the list is DeShone Kizer, who you would think I would have more anger for. 1 year, 15 starts, 0-15 record, 2,894 yards, 54% completion rate, 11 touchdowns, 22 interceptions.
I got to go with the F tier on this one too, my friend. He was there when you guys went 0-16, right?
Yeah, he's the guy.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I remember him. I felt like he was a guy that shouldn't. He was in a difficult situation, right, where he kind of got pushed into the starting role probably a year before he should have, but it was just completely abysmal, and he still has not rebounded. The last time I remember he was in Green Bay, I don't even know if he's in the NFL anymore. So for me, I hate to say it, but he's probably in the F tier for me as well.
I hate to put him in it because like it's not his fault. Like somebody they could have put Brock Osweiler in there. You know what I mean? Like, but they got rid of him before the season.
The fact that Sashi Brown tried to give that like celebration, I still remember that. Like when he passed on like Deshaun Watson, and then he just thought he was a genius for getting Kizer in the second round. I still remember that. He just thought he was like a genius. So yeah, I got to give him the F just for that. That's for you, Sashi.
Was that the same year? Was that? Yeah,
it was like he thought that DeShone Kizer was a steal in the second round. He was just like, I just remember it panned to him, and he was just like, "Oh, we got him! I told you guys it was gonna work out." And then 0-15.
Yeah, that was also. I remember DeShone Kizer said he was a mix between Cam Newton and Tom Brady, which never turned out to be true. He threw a ton of interceptions. I always thought he had more potential. I just think he went to the worst possible spot he could have went to. But yeah, man, he went 0-16. And I can't say with confidence that like if another quarterback was starting, we would have went 0-16. I think that was definitely on DeShone Kizer, some of it, and Hugh Jackson. But yeah, got to put you in there. Got to put DeShone Kizer in there. Now we're going to talk about Baker Mayfield. 2 years in the NFL so far, 29 starts, 12-17 record, threw for 7,552 yards, which is good. 62% completion, 49 touchdowns, 35 interceptions. That's a lot better than I thought it was on the touchdown interception ratio. Ace, what are your thoughts on Baker Mayfield?
He's an easy A tier for me. I know he had a shaky season, but there are a lot of quarterbacks that have a shaky season. They have to kind of have the league adjust to them, and then they kind of get to sit back and figure out what they're going to do in year 3. And I think that year 3 is going to be a year of progression for Baker Mayfield. I think that he still has the tools to make him a top quarterback, not only in this division, but also in the NFL. I'm not completely out on him. I know some people are out on him. Rex Ryan, this is a guy that drafted Mark Sanchez. He knows nothing about quarterbacks. So for me, I think Baker Mayfield easily, from what I've seen, is easily A tier. I mean, he's torched my Bengals plenty of times. I'm fairly confident with saying that he's in the A tier.
I get that. Here's the thing. I like Baker Mayfield a lot. I agree with you. I think he's probably in the A tier. I also think that sometimes people kind of like have really bad arguments for why they think Baker Mayfield's going to be good. Because I hear these arguments every time. I'm like, hey, Baker threw a lot of interceptions last year. People are like, well, they went off of wide receivers' hands. You know, he threw 25 balls that went off of defensive backs' hands. We don't count those. Like, I think there are some issues there with Baker Mayfield that I do worry about. Like, I think he's going to be a quarterback that's going to be here long enough to worry about it. He's definitely going to get a second contract. So these are issues that are worth worrying about. But, like, I think Baker's going to be good. I think he's going to be a stalwart name in the AFC North, but I also think he is going to have flaws that are very known. I think one of those flaws, and I hope this isn't true, and I hope he proves me wrong a million times over, but I think he has a trouble and a problem with consistently coming through in the clutch. It didn't happen in Oklahoma in any of the times he was in the college football playoffs, especially the close game they had in Georgia. He kind of did nothing in the overtime there. And then it didn't happen against the Ravens his rookie year when he was playing good. He threw that interception on the last drive to CJ Mosley. He has had multiple moments where he hasn't come through. He's had the one moment in Buffalo where he did come through at the end of the game, but that's something I think is just going to be an ongoing trope with him. So I caution Browns fans, like, there might be some issues coming up ahead, but that doesn't mean that he's not within that A or B tier. But I'll give him an A tier on that one. I think he's going to grow into and hopefully become an S tier guy if he can win something. But you don't get into the S tier unless you have done something spectacular. And he has not done it yet.
Just to piggyback off of that, I think what you talked about with like some of those flaws in terms of like the interceptions, I think you could easily say, at least from my perspective, Carson Palmer and Andy Dalton have had issues like that or similar to that as well. So
yeah, doesn't mean you're flawless if you're in the A tier, but it does mean that you are a legitimate starting quarterback for your franchise. And, you know, I think he does belong in that category. So I agree with you on there. Now, Lamar Jackson. This is going to be a hard dude to put because he is only started 22 games, but he's 19-3. Threw for 4,328 yards on 64% completion, has a 42-9 touchdown to interception ratio with 12 rushing touchdowns to add to that total. And he's also won the MVP.
Yep.
Where did we put Lamar Jackson?
I personally have to put him in the S tier, and this is why. When Mike Vick showed up in Atlanta, even though he did not win a Super Bowl, even though he did not win, I believe, an MVP. I don't think he won an MVP. I might be mistaken. He changed the entire NFL, and it was so hard for people to be able to play him, guard him. You would have to immediately change your entire defense just to incorporate for Mike Vick his ability to be able to run. So for me, I see the same thing on Lamar Jackson. The scary part is I see that he's a better thrower of the ball than Michael Vick. He's more accurate. Michael Vick had a stronger arm, but he wasn't as accurate. And what I'm saying with Lamar Jackson is a guy that has a more accurate arm. His legs are Vick-like. I haven't seen anybody run like that or have that ball carrier vision like Lamar Jackson has ever had. I mean, this was a guy that Bill Belichick just didn't know what to do with. And he definitely, in my opinion, does have Super Bowl winning caliber talent to the point where, like you just said, 47 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. Like, I would have never dreamed those numbers up for Lamar Jackson within the first 2 years. And I'm a Lamar Jackson guy. I was a truther from day one, ever since I saw him play FSU. And I remember people doubting him when he came through the Big Ben area. They were like, oh, this guy's overrated. He can't do it. And this was early on. And, man, he tore them a new one. And that team had guys that were top 5 recruits like that, like Derwin James, Jalen Ramsey, all of them. Like, he tore them up. He tore them a new one. So for me, I've got to say that he's in the S tier until the NFL figures him out. If someone can figure him out, I think that he moves down to the A tier. But as of now, all of the Bengals offseason moves have been done to clearly try to combat and stop Lamar Jackson. So for that reason, I'm going to have to say he's in the S tier.
Yeah, yep. All right. So the one question I have to ask you, because I know it's going to come up in the comments, is what about the 2 playoff losses? Does that affect his rating?
The 2 playoff losses, to me, not yet. I can't say that yet because there were several quarterbacks who kind of struggled, and I know this just because of Andy Dalton. Thanks to that, I've got every comparable stat for every quarterback who struggled in the playoffs. So given that it's just his first 2 times that he's lost, I can't really say that because there are more notable quarterbacks like Matt Ryan and other guys that really struggled to get that first playoff win after a while. So for me, since it's so early, I have to say I can't hold that against him. Now, if this were year 4 or 5 for him, and we're talking about he's got an 0-4, 0-5 playoff record, then yeah, I'd say there's an issue there. But I think they just ran into a team in Tennessee, which I kind of called that game. But, all the pressure was really on the Ravens, right? No one expected the Titans to be there, and they were teams that kind of mirrored each other, and no one was just ready for Derrick Henry. So for me, Lamar just got kind of caught up in that, and I'd have to give him somewhat of a pass for those 2 games. Now, if we were talking year 3, I might be on the fence, but 2 seasons, I can't really put that on him yet.
That's true. And I will say, for the argument on S tier, I'm sorry, but there are only 3 people in the NFL, maybe 4 if I think about it, that scare me as much as Lamar Jackson does when he comes up on the schedule. It's because you can't stop him.
Right.
When Patrick Mahomes comes to town, yeah, I'm very worried when Patrick Mahomes comes to town. When Tom Brady comes to town 3 years ago, I'm very worried because it's Tom Brady. I don't know if it's the same when he's in Tampa Bay, but I'm not about to disrespect Tom Brady because that just don't end well most of the time. But when Big Ben in his prime comes to town, you're very afraid. And to the reverse of that, if you heard Lamar Jackson wasn't going to play in a game that you were about to play against him, you're celebrating. And then you lose in week 16 like the Steelers. Shout out to him. But Lamar is just, it's only because it's only been 2 years, right? And 19 starts. So it feels really early to put him in the S category. But
it's also the fact that he's a rare breed. You're not gonna find Lamar Jackson is the first guy we've seen since Vic since the early 2000s. So it's that's the other part of it too, is that he's a rare commodity where you're not going to find guys that come out and just, that's Lamar Jackson. Everyone's looking for the next Lamar Jackson, but you're not going to find him. It's not that easy to find.
That's true. Now, what I would ask you is, if we were doing this list for the NFC East in 2013, would we feel the same way about a guy like RG3?
I think that we would feel that he was somewhat close. I remember him getting the Rookie of the Year, but I don't think he was in the MVP race. That's so true. I think that we would consider him ascending, and we would probably feel that he could have some superstar potential. But because he only had 1 good year, right? So with LJ, we kind of have 1.5. So I would say RG3 was good, but I almost feel like Cam's first year might have been, dare I say, better.
Yeah. With Cam, it gets muddy because people don't want to be truthful about muddy. Cam. Yeah, but with Lamar, it's just 19 starts, which is not a ton, but those numbers in those 19 starts, it reminds me. And I hope his career doesn't go on the same trajectory. I'm not wishing this on him, but it reminds me kind of like Derrick Rose and his ascension to greatness in the NBA. And it's you kind of have that caution. We put him in S tier, and in 2 years, he's kind of like a meme because he got injured or something. It's good, but he has that MVP. You can't take that away from him. And I think I will ultimately have to put Lamar Jackson in S tier, because I think no matter what happens, people are gonna Lamar Jackson season last season it's gonna be one of those seasons where it's like with Vic. Vic had 2 or 3 great years really in Atlanta, and then 1 good year in Philly. But we talk about those years so much that we think Vic was out here dominating for 17 years.
You would have thought that he won a Super Bowl or something, but it's nah. It's just the way that he just changed the league. And I think that we're going to see something similar to that with Lamar Jackson, and we already seen it from Vic. That's why we have Lamar Jackson. That's why we have Russell Wilson and all of these mobile quarterbacks. And I just think that impact is just crazy. It's just crazy. Like, I really want to see. Now, one thing is, you did make a good point, and people always talk about this. Is Lamar going to be able to last? Like, Michael Vick had to retire early. A lot of these guys, RG3 went down with an injury. We're seeing what's going on with Cam now. I think that's going to really determine whether or not he stays in the S tier or not. He could easily go into the A tier, but I think just based off of the MVP and this rise that he's already having, I think that there's possibly another level he could tap into, similar to when Michael Vick got to Philadelphia and we saw him actually become a passer.
Don't say
and
that.
That's what's scary. That's what's scary. That's the scary part, is once he starts to master that aspect of it. And we're talking about Pat Mahomes is talking about he just learned how to read defenses last year. Yeah. So imagine when Lamar Jackson learns how to read defenses like in year 6 or 7, it's gonna.
That's also another thing, that because we can say, well, it's only 19 starts, but like it's also only 19 starts. And he's already done this much damage. Yeah, Lamar Jackson, man, he's gonna be an interesting guy to watch. It stinks that both him and Patrick Mahomes are both in the AFC, because
Steelers fans are probably gonna kill us for this, because they're gonna be like, but Big Ben has this many Super Bowls, he has no hardware.
Steeler fans, man, they a different breed out here. They're gonna be like, Kordell Stewart was really Lamar Jackson. I promise you, we're gonna hear that take down there. Kordell Stewart was actually better than Lamar Jackson. People just don't give him his love. All right, buddy. Yeah. But I think I'm pretty happy with what we ended up here. I think we have a really accurate list. I think we have a really accurate tier list here for you guys. So I want to thank Ace for coming on the show today. Ace, thank you for coming on. This is a great list. I think I'm very proud of it. And also, if you want to hear me, Ace, and 2 other folks talk about the AFC North, join us on AFC North Talk. This is where we talk about football and the AFC North type things. A Browns fan, a Ravens fan, a Steelers fan, and a Bengals fan all get down there to argue with each other about the teams. So if you want more content like this, check that out. Ace, appreciate you coming on here. Any final thoughts before we sign out today?
Yes, sir. I really appreciated doing this. Guys, don't kill me in the comments. I wasn't trying to overrate Bengals quarterbacks or anything. I just tried to go with my honest opinion on those. But if you are interested in hearing any Bengals specific stuff, definitely be sure to check out my channel, New Stripe City, and definitely check out the AFC North Talk with me, Quincy, and our Ravens and our Steelers roundtable, because it's amazing. You'll love it. It's great content.
Especially with the draft coming up, there's going to be good content before and after the draft. I believe we're going to be doing mock drafts next time we meet up. Also, don't forget to check out his podcast, Orange is the New Black, with Zim Hude. It's I would say the best Bengals podcast out there. So if you're a Bengals fan listening to it, go ahead and check that thing out. It is well recommended and very good. Ace, go ahead, man.
Oh, I was going to say just before that, we actually just interviewed Sean Williams today, so be on the lookout for that.
Ooh, my man got the connections over there. All right, but thank you guys for watching. Let me know what your thoughts down below are on this tier list. Do you think somebody was overrated? Or are you going to tell me that Joe Flacco does not belong in the A tier, or Andy Dalton doesn't? Or are you going to troll me and say that Baker Mayfield should be F tier? Let me know down in the comment section what you would reorganize this grouping as. But again, guys, thank you for watching. Have a great day. Have a